Make sure all of your mics are on. Sorry about that. Okay, Mayor Studebaker.
Here.
Councilor Lamont.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
Mans.
Here.
Kohlhoff.
Here.
O'Neill.
Here.
And Wynn.
Here.
Would you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a short announcement before we get into citizen comment. Oswego City Council would like to take a moment to mention that the League of Women Voters is marking 100 years of service in the nation and the state of Oregon. The League of Women Voters, like Oswego, was formed in 1955, later expanding to include West Linn and Wilsonville, and then merging with Clackamas County cities on the east side. Now called the Clackamas County League of Women Voters, members are known for their significant contributions to local government and public service in our community. So congratulations to the League of Women Voters. Now let's get into citizen comment. First, Bruce Poinsett.
I would like to comment on a portion of a 100-page report that recently came out about the West Linn Police involving people from the LOPD, and specifically, and this is in regards to the recent West Linn Police scandal with Michael Fesser, and it's specifically in regards to a portion of the report that talked about how LO Police targeted Black and brown people using the terms Nilo and Milo, for those who don't know, which stood for N-word in LO and Mexican in LO, and also the revelation that the city sued news media and a reporter to suppress this information. So this was back, I want to say about 2000, if I remember the report right, around 2008, 2009. And these revelations particularly hit home with me because I was in high school and early college at the time, and I remember hearing the rumors when I was a student at LO High that police officers were effectively keeping tabs on the students, knew everyone who was involved in anything remotely illegal, and thus could pick and choose who they targeted. Reading these Nilo and Milo revelations simply confirmed what I already gleaned from incidents like when I was being followed down Kerr Parkway and all the way down Kerr Parkway and stopped by Westlake Park for not signaling 100 feet within a stop sign, which is physically impossible on the winding road. And it further puts my first encounter with LO Police in context. I was at the 7-Eleven, which is a couple blocks up the street, when I was walking out and a car blocked off the exit to the side street, and instead of driving down across the median and down State Street, I decided to drive around because I knew that if I went through the median, it would be an excuse to be pulled over. Nonetheless, I was still followed and pulled over for quote-unquote driving suspiciously and accused of robbing the store. When a resonated weed pipe fell out of my glove compartment, the officer claimed it could be a gun and then called back up on me. In the end, I was shook down for a maximum possession ticket and fined for simply having that pipe. I share that story to say this: cases like mine are where a lot of discriminatory behavior happens. These are the cases on the margins, people whose situations aren't perfect enough and who don't have the political connections to make a public outcry. I had plenty of white peers who were well known for actual drug dealing, drunk driving, and both figuratively and many times literally daring the police to do something about it. And do you have any idea how far out of their way they had to go to get the police attention I received, and that many Black people simply passing through this town tell stories of receiving? If you want to understand why these Nilo and Milo revelations touch such a nerve with me, it's not because officers are being derogatory. To be clear, that's unacceptable too. It's because code words like that are the signal for harassing people with fishing expeditions for whatever crime they can find. The calculated nature of it is particularly infuriating because officers know most of us from marginalized communities don't have any power to fight back. These institutions have more resources, and the community won't care about you unless you're the perfect Rosa Parks test case and you can stick the landing in every press conference, news story, and social media post. While I acknowledge... Excuse me?
Sorry, but you're running out of time.
Okay, well, I'll try to finish quickly. While LO Police certainly have been making steps to correct this culture, the reality is community members still bring these same police encounter horror stories to me all the time and other members of Respond to Racism LO. The department can talk about training hours all it wants, but if the community members most affected are still talking about the same toxic culture my peers and I were living through over a decade ago, that suggests there's still a long, long way to go. So I'll leave you with a few constructive suggestions, not nearly enough, but just a few, if we want to take this seriously, not just for show, but in practice in a way that can help those most affected. 1, equity trainings must require an assessment component that holds officers accountable for being able to demonstrate what they've learned and applying it in their interactions with the public, and there should be disciplinary action for going against the tenets of those trainings and specifically for engaging in racially discriminatory behavior. 2, the department in particular and LOC government as a whole should conduct a thorough, independent equity audit with a culturally relevant firm, and the selection process for that firm should utilize community input from the stakeholders closest to the issue. And 3, the City of LO should create an independent citizens review board for the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Thorrington.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name's Nancy Thorrington. I'm also here to talk about the Fesser situation. Mr. Fesser's lawsuit has brought to the surface an ugly boil that's been festering for well over 100 years. From before the time the mayor of Portland was photographed fully clad members of the KKK in 1921 until now, from the time Oregon became a state and made it illegal to be black, from the time Lake Oswego became a city, a sundown town, and a place that still has the nickname Lake No Negro. This incident demonstrates what many people of color have known and been trying to tell us for years. The police are here to protect and serve wealthy white people, but not always them. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of respect for the police. My father and grandfather were both police officers. Their jobs are tough and often dangerous, but that does not give them the right to abuse their authority. This incident also brings to light the subculture that runs through the Blue Brotherhood. The culture demands loyalty at all costs. Good and conscientious officers must choose either staying quiet to the abuses of their fellow officers or crossing the blue line and risk being ostracized, abused, fired, blacklisted, or worse. Timius, a former LOPD police captain, is just one example of the culture, which has been around since there were police officers. It runs deep, so we're not going to change it overnight. While I appreciate the sentiment that the culture has changed, given that this incident happened just over 2 years ago, I don't think that's a realistic assessment. We need to take steady, methodical, and decisive steps to change it, and we must take those steps now. Our citizens and the many good officers in our police force are suffering every day that this culture continues. So what are some of the actions that you as a city council can take now? First, you must make the Lake Oswego DEI Task Force a permanent advisory body to this council with input into decisions related to the police department. Second, you must create a police oversight committee. Third, you must review the police contracts when they come up for renegotiation and add stronger citizen oversight and accountability to the community. Officers must be required to take a minimum amount of participatory DEI training approved by the DEI Task Force and the Oversight Committee. There must be a code of conduct for our officers and specific measurable consequences for officers who are found to have violated that code. Monthly reports of the demographic information of all persons stopped by the LOPD must be made public. There need to be periodic external audits that review personnel files and citizen complaints and complaints by officers of harassments, threats, or intimidations they experience within the department. The auditors must have the authority to recommend disciplinary action, which if not followed, could become public, so we bring this underground culture out into the light. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Willie Poinsett.
Good evening. I'm president and co-founder of Respond to Racism in LO. I come to you tonight remembering the past and feeling hopeful for the future. I've lived in Lake Oswego since 1986 and understand why our town is nicknamed Lake No Negro. As I learn more about the racist past and practices of Lake Oswego and have had first-hand experiences, I want to change that label. But it's hard when I walk down the aisle in the supermarket and a white woman looks up at me and grabs her purse. Or when I go to a local restaurant where there is a waiting line and the host seats the person in front of me and then comes back and attempts to seat the person behind me. But the hopeful part is this last time, which wasn't too long ago, the person spoke up and said, "I was first." Often, I say that I'm invisible, and I must change that narrative. People of color are very visible. That's why terms like Milo and Nilo were used by police to identify people who were not welcome in Lake Oswego. Some longtime African-American residents in this city have told me about how their children, mostly boys, have been harassed by the police department, whether they were driving or walking in their respective neighborhoods. If you follow next door or read the police blog, you know seeing people of color in the neighborhood is still a problem. The same goes for our children of color daily in our schools, where they are harassed and subjected to racism. So using the term invisible is not accurate. We people of color are very visible, and we are just as valuable to Lake Oswego as white people. The recent newspaper headlines provided a reality check of the racist history of this town. However, I see hope with the acceptance of Respond to Racism as a viable organization to work to educate and empower residents to interrupt racism. I see hope with the establishment of the DEI task force, and I hope that it will be a permanent board or committee. I see hope with the training that key people have received in this town from the Museum of Tolerance. It's money well spent. The generational trauma caused by racism affects everyone in our community and those that will follow in our footsteps. Yet, I'm hopeful. I am here to help make the change that I want to see. There are others who want to help, and as elected officials, it's imperative that you take off any blinders that you may have and any cloaks of white privilege or the cloaks of white privilege, and recognize that this is not the 1800s, and diversity in Lake Oswego is a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Harry Kramer. Go ahead.
Go ahead, thanks. Thank you, Mayor and City Councilors. My name's Terry Kramer, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Respond to Racism. And the handout that you've received, I'm going to read to you. This is a list of suggested actions that came from our steering committee and also from our community meeting. Number 1, make the DEI task force permanent. 2, establish an independent citizen police oversight board with the power to effect change that receives copies of all complaints against officers and can also independently take complaints from our citizens. 3, collect and provide demographic data on every person subjected to a police stop, incident, or arrest while preserving confidentiality. 4, require rigorous diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all members of the police force and ensure that they are actually engaged and demonstrate an understanding of the training and accountable to learning. 5, demand a more diverse police force and more diverse city council. 6, develop a detailed and thorough strategy within the Lake Oswego Police Department and city government to confront racial bias and sexual misconduct and other forms of discrimination, and to positively promote diversity and equity within staffing and personnel performance, workplace culture, and plans and programs. Next, create a specific mandatory process to be followed when complaints indicate repeat patterns or reach a threshold of severity. Demand an audit of the city on culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and be sure that the Lake Oswego Police Department is included in that audit. Ensure that our city manager, assistant city manager, and city attorney are involved in ongoing reviews of police activity. Review the police union contract and understand it. Plan for addressing the anticipated police union pushback to changes. Conduct a survey of our community on whether they feel safe in LO, in our schools, in our public spaces, and present the results to police and city council. Demand disclosure of what follow-up the city has done after its investigation by the HR department to ensure its Milo and Nilo investigation thoroughly addressed the racism in the LOPD and in city management. Review city structure to see if there are sufficient checks and balances in place, and facilitate community dialogue about police tactics in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia Nemicus, is that right? Thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for holding this meeting here today. I appreciate it. I wanted to discuss the Nilo Milo slurs and Lake No Negro and how that's having an effect on the youth in Lake Oswego. We know that Lake Oswego hasn't always been a city that has been open to minority communities. In fact, we were home to many a Ku Klux Klan march back in the 1900s, and even back in 2017, there was a march led in the Ku Klux Klan with a self-proclaimed Grand Wizard that was held in Lake Oswego. The effect that that's having on the youth in Lake Oswego pertaining to the Nilo Milo slurs is that there are groups of minority kids that are continually ostracized. There are kids that are subjected to slurs over social media, in school. There are jokes being made in Lake Oswego High School by kids saying, "Oh, pray for my friend. There ain't nothing wrong for him. He's just black." This is a direct result of the fact that sometimes when a city doesn't take full accountability for the fact that there is racism going on within the police task force and there is racism going on within the community, and it doesn't address that publicly, and it doesn't fully address the steps that are going to be publicly taken to change this community, the youth aren't let in on this. We don't fully know what isn't okay and what is okay. Our morals are still growing. I'm 16. My morals are continuing to grow and continuing to be shaped by the adults like you and like the other members in this community around me. I rely on the fact that you guys are the ones that need to make decisions that will put the youth in Lake Oswego in the best possible position to grow into community. But it's pretty difficult to do that when they're members of the police force that have Nilo Milo terms that they're using on their jobs while they're on the task force to alert other members of the police force that there is a minority member in Lake Oswego. Minority kids aren't a cause that are supposed to raise alarm. It is not something that is reasonable for a police officer to say, "Oh, we need to alert another member of our task force that there is someone who isn't white in our community." This isn't the way it should be, but I can tell you a million different things that could be done. But what I really want to know is what is going to be done. I need to know that there is some assurance that equity is going to be practiced, that there are de-escalation courses that are going to be continually taken by the police forces to educate themselves on equity and diversity. I want to know that there is reassurance for the kids that they will receive education on diversity, receive trainings like Diversity Day. I know that Catlin Gable is actually conducting one of those and has been for several years. This is an important part of the community that we don't let members fall by the wayside because they're of a different race or because they speak a different language. Lake Oswego is supposed to be a community. It is not a place of racism. And I hope that some action today will be taken to make sure that that is not the standard that continues, and that kids don't call Lake Oswego, not Lake Oswego, but Lake No Negro. That's not the name that this city should bear, but right now, that's what it is. All I want to know is that there's going to be some action taken to ensure that that is not the way things continue. We as a city failed to protect an officer.
Your time is up.
Time is up, okay.
That's all right. If you got a sentence or two to finish up, please do so.
I'd like to finish up.
Okay?
There was a citizen that was ostracized in our community. We failed to give him proper reparations because there was an officer that got let off the hook for something he shouldn't have. I want to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and that we as a city will make sure that this is not the kind of thing that we want to stand for. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nemicus?
Thank you for your time this evening. I'm also coming with great concern about the history of how business was conducted within the city of Lake Oswego when a 25-page report raising concerns about Mr. Timius's conduct on the job was handled. I'm very concerned about the absence of transparency with those concerns and the apparent failure of the council, the mayor, and city staff and city attorney at that time to respond to those concerns with adequate policy reform, or we would not be here tonight having this conversation. I'm actually a proud bipartisan voter who voted for you, Mayor Studebaker, because I respect your willingness to address transparency and to hold city staff as accountable as they should be, because you are their boss, the city council members, you are the boss of city staff, and therefore for the police chiefs. And I hope that you will take all of the concerns and recommendations made tonight with utmost gravity and utmost haste in terms of policy reform. I echo every single recommendation that was made by Respond to Racism members as well. The piece I would like to add for clarification is that I have worked with police members in the city of Portland. I've worked with an Oregon detective on addressing neo-Nazi gang youth interventions, and I have had utmost respect and gratitude for every single one of those law enforcement members. I've also worked as a public employee, and nowhere in my years would my conduct using my Milo or Nilo have been tolerated. I would have been fired on the spot. Any officer acting in that behavior ought to have as well, and it's an embarrassment that that did not occur. The trainings are a good first step, but obviously it's a shortfall and a drop in the bucket. Lastly, I would add, not only do members of this community who are Black and brown deserve to be able to not have to fear for their safety or that they're going to be pulled over or harassed or flagged as a Milo or Nilo, but for people who wonder what's in it for us because they're white, I would add that actually for youth in this city, the research is abundantly clear from Ivy Leagues such as Columbia, Stanford, that children who are white growing up in a homogeneity-endowed community are less likely to thrive in higher academic endeavors, and they are less likely to thrive and succeed in the business world. So I'd like to make the case based on Ivy League research that it benefits the entire community to make Lake Oswego a place where people who are diverse can come and live and work without fear. I hope that you will take to heart very seriously every concern that has been raised by Respond to Racism this evening, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Beth Hoover.
Good evening. I'd like to extend my appreciation to the mayor and council for your service to the city of Lake Oswego. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to live in Lake Oswego. Tonight, I'd like to briefly table the proposed city and public school partnership to build a recreation center on the site of the Lake Oswego Public Golf Course. Thank you for allowing me to share a bit of my history that colors my perspective about the project. In 1866, my family ancestor, John Corse Trollinger, secured the first plat with Clackamas County, which is now Lake Oswego. Inspired by Trollinger's pioneer spirit and love of Lake Oswego, my dad, Doug Oliphant, volunteered 45 years of his life to public service, including the Lake Oswego Public Golf Course. In 2014, the Oliphant Community Golf Tournament was founded to inspire volunteer service and bless Lake Oswego local charities, including the Muni. All ages and skill levels can play at the Lake Oswego Public Golf Course and their tournaments. In 6 years, almost 800 golfers, sponsors, and volunteers have participated in the Oliphant. We are blessed to report that we have gifted nearly $50,000 to Lake Oswego Meals on Wheels, Lake Oswego Transitional Shelter Ministry, the children through Shriners Hospital, the Mobility Impaired Golf Association that play at the Muni. And this year, we will be adding the Lake Oswego Police Department Caring Cards program. In addition to the green fees and course services, the Oliphant makes an annual donation to the Lake Oswego Public Course to enhance the golf experience for the players. It's a city value to promote tourism, and I believe it's noteworthy to share the sponsors that participate with us, and we invite them to play. That would include Chick-fil-A, Titleist, Rebound Orthopedic, Top Golf, Columbia Sportswear, Dick's Sporting Goods, their national organization, Bentley Seed in Cambridge, New York, Widmer Brothers, and Dave's Killer Bread, to name just a few of the hundreds of sponsors in the last 6 years. We are honored and privileged to be a part of the blessing to others. The Lake Oswego Public Golf Course has been a critical success to the charitable giving in the community. While I recognize the tournament may not be of value to the council and those that promote the rec building, I am confident that you do support the community gathering that we promote and the wonderful benefits that it has been to charities. If the course is reduced to 9 or 12 holes, there will no longer be an Oliphant Community Golf Tournament. My question is, why is it necessary to destroy one of the historic jewels of the city, the only municipal golf course in town? There simply has to be another suitable location that promotes the reclamation and the revitalization versus destroying an irreplaceable asset and open space. In closing, I want to quote from the book of Esther that says, "Perhaps you have been born for such a time as this. Your vote and your voice will be a lasting imprint on the city of Lake Oswego." On behalf of my family, the Oliphant Community Golf Tournament, and the citizens who love the Lake Oswego Muni Golf Course, please save the 18-hole course. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Meg Wilkinson.
I'm going to be ceding my time to Gail Walmart.
All right.
So we don't cede time during citizen comment. That's reserved for public hearing, although that's your discretion, Mayor.
Ask me that one more time, please.
We don't provide for ceding
know.
comment during citizen comment, usually during public hearing, but it's your discretion.
No, I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, we have not done that before. Go ahead, but you're going to be limited to 3 minutes.
Well, we were originally going to split our comments into two, but Meg's got a bad voice tonight, and so I was going to do,
I'm sorry.
It's just 5 minutes in
No.
total.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Gail Walmark. I live on Kilkenny Road, and I'm a board member of the LPGA Amateurs Portland chapter, which runs a weekly league and schedules tournaments and instructional clinics at the Muni. I'm here representing a growing grassroots opposition to locating the proposed aquatic recreation center or any other non-golf development on the current 40-acre Lake Oswego golf course property. Our mission is to save the current property and ensure a vibrant, financially viable future for public golf in Lake Oswego. In the 4 weeks since we launched our effort, we have gathered over 350 signatories, all Lake Oswego residents, to our opposition petition, and a third of them have pledged financial support. You may not be golfers, but please appreciate that golf is a singular recreation. It can be enjoyed for a lifetime by people of all ages and races and from all walks of life, and even by those with disabilities. Inherent in the rules and etiquette of golf are character-building values like confidence, respect, integrity, responsibility, and perseverance. We're troubled that no one in leadership seems to recognize the Muni as parkland. Golf depends on and celebrates our natural environment. A course's terrain, its contours, creeks, ponds, and trees are precisely what challenges those who play it and delights all those who live and travel by it. Several of you have told me you believe golf is a declining sport. Perhaps all of you have a similar perception, but the most recent National Golf Foundation data show quite the opposite. Here in the Northwest, where rounds played rose 5%, and in Greater Portland, where rounds rose 10%. In fact, rounds played at our Muni have held steady for the past 3 years, despite the worsening conditions caused by inattention to long-standing drainage and irrigation issues and the creep of maintenance cutbacks. Land is the single most important element in golf, and 40 acres isn't a lot. We're happy to see the scheduling of a public forum this coming Thursday with the highly regarded golf architect Dan Hickson. I'm sure he'll say, and we agree, that the course could certainly be reconfigured on a reduced property footprint. But I'm also even more certain that he would say he'd much prefer to have every square inch of the 40 acres to work with, and that is the crux of our campaign. Please know that golf is not only about playing the course. Unlike other sports, golf isn't one you organically just start playing. Beginners must spend considerable time learning how to hit shots before ever getting onto the course. And even once they become players, lessons and practice sessions are as much a part of their game as on-course play, which is why a commitment to public golf in Lake Oswego cannot only be about the layout of the holes.
Ma'am,
Ensuring of
ma'am,
I'll be finished quickly. Ensuring a vibrant, viable future for our Muni requires these essential elements. The layout of the playing holes must be long enough to earn a USGA rating and be properly maintained. The facility must include commensurate teaching and practice space and resources, usable year-round, and it must have dedicated space for high-demand, high-value retail sales. Those elements are the engines that will drive revenues and enable the Muni to operate in the black. We're fortunate our Muni already has great character,
ma'am,
is beautiful,
ma'am.
fun, charming, a gem,
no,
and a draw.
that's enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Deb Wilkinson.
Good evening. In regard to the Lake Oswego Public Golf Course, I don't need 3 minutes. Most of you know my position at this point. What I wanted to say because I am a supporter in keeping the golf course intact. I believe that this beautiful piece of land that we were given virtually 50 years ago that has continuously been used as a golf course deserves to keep that space. For generations, people have golfed on it, and people of all age brackets. Thousands of golfers each year golf on that golf course. It is a sad commentary that you are looking at taking from one recreational sport, a facility, and giving it to another recreational sport, swimming, pitting one group against another. That is so wrong. This golf course is an amazing place. It's a place I love, I golf at, and I've golfed at for over 20 years. I ask you to look inside yourself and figure a way that you can find a different place for the other recreational sports. I love this golf course, and I believe it deserves your support.
Molly, is it McGreen? What are we doing here?
Good evening, Mayor Studebaker, members of City Council. For the record, my name is Molly McGrew, and I am the Vice President of the Lake Oswego Community Rowing Club. And with me here tonight is my daughter, Katie Gallatley, who is an 8th grader at Lake Oswego Junior High. She's a varsity rower. And another board member is Craig Oliva. And we're here today to invite all of you at some point in time to join us in a Learn to Row program over on the Willamette River at your very own water sports facility, the Charlie S. Brown Water Park. And in addition to that, we'd like to open that to any golfer who would also like to come and join us at any point in time as well. This is the first time we've had an opportunity to introduce ourselves to all of you. And we look forward to working with each of you through the City Council, Parks and Rec Department, and others in order to continue to expand operations on the water for the Lake Oswego Community Rowing Club. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Craig or Katie. No, they're both like terrified. Okay. That's it.
Okay, so you're representing the Oswego Rowing Club?
Yes, the Lake Oswego Community Rowing Club.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for giving us some of your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing. Mr. Powell, can you review things for us?
This is the time set for a public hearing on Resolution 20-07, a resolution of the Lake Oswego City Council approving the Luscher Farm Concept Plan for purposes of applying to Metro for an amendment to the Portland urban growth boundary. This is a legislative decision, which is generally a policy decision that's within the discretion of the City Council. And although it may be discretionary, it must also comply with any state law as well as any applicable statewide planning goal administrative rule adopted pursuant to RS Chapter 197. Also, in this instance, there are Metro code provisions that it must be in compliance with. The public hearing process is set forth in the agenda. We'll begin with a staff report, followed by testimony in the following order in support of the proposal, in opposition, and neutral. There will be 10 minutes allowed for representatives of recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations, 5 minutes for other persons. The time limits will not include time taken up by questions from the council or responses to those questions. And in this case, any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case will any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Because this is legislative, I won't ask about ex parte contacts or bias, but I would ask if any city councilor wishes to make a declaration relating to conflict of interest.
No.
And hearing no declarations, does any member of the audience wish to challenge a city council member's right to consider this proposal? And hearing no challenges, we'd be ready for the staff report.
Thank you, David. Scott Siegel, Planning and Building Services Director. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. And joining us is Ivan Anderholm, your Parks and Recreation Director. We're going to tag team a little bit on this, but by way of background, the resolution is brought to you following the council's earlier action last year to initiate a concept plan that is one of the application requirements for the city to apply to Metro to begin the process of amending the urban growth boundary to bring in Luscher Farm so that the city may at some point annex the area. We're looking at 83 acres. It's the area that consists of Luscher Farm and the immediately adjacent properties, and we'll look at that in just a moment. The purpose of the hearing, again, is really to receive direction and approval of a concept plan that the city would submit to Metro for a UGB application. The concept plan itself is not a functional plan. It doesn't change zoning. It doesn't change our comprehensive plan. It doesn't initiate any annexation or land use action beyond fulfilling Metro's requirements for a concept plan. This is the area, of course, looking southwest. The existing Azalea Field is within the city limits, within the urban growth boundary, and as well as the dog park. Those lands were brought into the urban growth boundary over a decade ago. And the city did at one point propose a larger urban growth boundary expansion that included Luscher Farm and scaled that back. That was in 2011, 2012. And at that point, the Luscher area master plan had not been completed. The disposition of the urban reserve area in the Stafford Basin had not been resolved. And so that perhaps informed the decision to scale back the urban growth boundary change at that point. But the direction all along has been to bring these properties into the city limits so that the city can manage this park, this open space area, an asset of the city that it's already operating parks and recreational uses on, urban agricultural uses on, and has adopted a master plan for the area. So this is just one step, as I was saying, in the overall process of bringing Luscher Farm into the city limits and applying city zoning. The steps, as you can see here, we are at March 3rd. The Planning Commission has conducted a public hearing. They've made their recommendation. That's incorporated into the staff report as Exhibit B1. The concept plan itself is Exhibit A1, Attachment 1. And the next step then would be for the council to conduct a public hearing and to make a decision on the resolution that is before you. You have received public testimony that has come in and talking about the process with City Attorney Powell and Director Anderholm. We think it would be appropriate if the council does take action tonight that you give direction to staff to move forward in submitting the concept plan to Metro as the Metro deadline for major amendments this year is March 15th, although we would bring back findings at your meeting 2 weeks from now to formally adopt the decision, incorporating and addressing the testimony that you've already received and any more that you may receive this evening. And this is just showing the full timeline. Again, we're here at March 3rd, and there is this other work that would need to be completed before the property could be brought into the city limits, including updating the city's comprehensive plan, updating our urban growth management agreement with Clackamas County, and initiating an annexation process that would apply the zoning to this area, which is proposed as a parks and natural area zone. The city charter requires that annexations in the Stafford Basin are subject to a vote of the electorate of Lake Oswego, so there is that step that would be required as well. So here's the subject site, 83 acres. Ivan can discuss a little bit more about the background and the master plan. That isn't correct. I'll back up there, excuse me. So when we brought this concept plan to the Planning Commission for their input, they did receive testimony from the owner of, and you can disregard the red rectangle that moved a little bit to off of the area that we were trying to highlight. The commission received testimony from the owner of the property that is there on Rosemont Road, that the boundary moves around, that it does not include in the concept plan. And the property owner was asking if this proposal would create an island of rural land within the urban growth boundary. And in fact, it would not. It maneuvers around the property, and there is a portion of Rosemont Road that would not be included. So we've asked Metro to provide some guidance on that, so that before we submit the urban growth boundary amendment application, that area, per Metro's recommendation, we would either submit it as proposed, or the UGB, the urban growth boundary, would end at the western most common property line there, where the private property and Luscher Farm share the property line, so that we're not creating a gap along Rosemont Road, if you follow me. It's a detail, but something that we want to make sure that Metro is comfortable with the proposal, and we would ask the council, if you do recommend approval or you do adopt the resolution, that you provide staff the ability to make that adjustment before we submit the UGP application based on Metro's recommendation. So just a little bit of background. The site does have water, municipal water along Stafford Road, McVeigh. On the property itself, there are wells, and there's no water service beyond the area that's currently improved at Azalea Field and wells. There are septic fields on the property. There is sewer that traverses the northern portion of the property. What we're showing here actually includes more than Luscher Farm. So Luscher Farm is this area that we're proposing to bring into the urban growth boundary that I'm tracing here, and up along Stafford Road. And then it does not include Azalea Field or the dog park. So it moves up along here, and then it comes up this way to Burgess Road. So there is sewer that abuts that portion of the property. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Anderholm to talk a little bit more about the history and the context and why the city is proposing the UGB or the concept plan at this time.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. So the history of the property, I'm not going to go through this, but between 1991 and 2005, the city purchased a number of properties out in the Luscher area. And with those purchases, the city began master planning in 2010 and completed that in 2013. That resulted in a master plan that came before council and was adopted in July of that year. I do want to mention, too, that city programs, i.e., the types of programs that you see out there, including the community gardens, began in 1997. However, the programs actually predated the city owning the property. Rudy Luscher actually began community farms in 1991 and sold some lots to community members. So the community's been utilizing the property out there since 1991. Current uses for the facility or for the parkland out there, obviously we have community supported agriculture. There's about 12 acres. We have community gardens. We have the Friends of Rogerson Clematis collection out there. We have a children's garden. Obviously we have the White Barn, the farmhouse, a bunkhouse, and then the Fur Lane house. Currently under EFU in Clackamas County, our community-supported agriculture, our community gardens, the FRCC collection, and the children's garden are permitted in EFU. When it gets a little bit tricky is the public utilizing those spaces other than their intended use. One of the issues, and we've been put on notice by Clackamas County a number of times of noncompliance, is we can have community gardens and a community-supported agriculture, but in the EFU zone, we can't have tours of those facilities. Like if a school bus comes in and we want to take a group of third graders out and show them that, EFU currently does not allow that in Clackamas County. Other uses that are taking place on the property that are not allowed in EFU are trails, soft surface trails. The paved trail is a permitted use because it's part of a larger transportation system. However, soft surface trails are not allowed in EFU in Clackamas County. So there are a number of things, and then also the continuation of implementation of the master plan, which calls for more educational classes, camps, engagement of the community, learning more about organic farming and community-supported agriculture currently are not permissible on the property. Planned uses, I alluded to some of these, but classrooms to engage the community, soft surface, multi-purpose trails, access and parking, events of various sizes, and then obviously classes and programs, which would include urban ag, environmental education, and active recreation. This map right here is a map that is directly out of the master plan, and how do I point?
Top one.
Top one, yes. So just to go through some of the highlights of this, you have the existing Azalea field and parking lot. The master plan has additional athletic fields, additional parking, court facilities at the north edge of the property. All these white lines are numerous soft surface trails throughout the property. Area 22 and 21 are designated, that's the Fur Lane home and the garage. It's designated for environmental education and playground. And then obviously we have our community gardens and the central core of the property. And that's a blow up of that.
And that red outline in the southwest, larger southwest area is an historic designation. So when this is brought into the city's comprehensive plan, we would be looking at applying some type of historic landmark designation to the
Yes,
farm.
transferring the Clackamas County historic designation to a city designation. Do you want to touch on these, or?
No, I think this is probably a good overview, and I just wanted to touch on the testimony that you've received so far, and before we conclude here. So Mr. Cook had submitted a couple of exhibits, comments on the city's comprehensive plan, Goal 8, recreation. It's referencing the prior version of the comprehensive plan, so the policies that were referenced in relation to Goal 8 were from the 1994 plan. That language was replaced in 2013, and the staff report and the Planning Commission have addressed the current policies and applicable criteria. And Metro will be looking at this as well to look at, have we demonstrated that there is a need for park and recreation land? That's really the key criterion, that there's a need for the land, and we believe that there is, and it's a unique type of land need. There was also a reference to Metro Code. So going back to the multi-step process that we're just now beginning, the concept plan under Metro Code has a set of criteria which we've addressed in the staff report, and the Planning Commission made findings showing that we meet those criteria. There are other criteria that Metro will apply in making the decision as to whether or not they will expand the urban growth boundary, and the testimony, I think, was referring to the UGB criteria, which we are addressing in our application to Metro. Those requirements will be addressed there. The Fur Lane property, and Ivan could probably address this, there is no school proposed on that site, and there are other uses that will have to continue to comply with the deed restrictions. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No.
Okay.
One thing, if I might add to that, in addition to the segment of the deed that was quoted by the person testifying that talked about, specifically said no commercial purpose or construction of a school, that follows the language that was in the conveyance deed that says the use of the property by the grantee shall be restricted in perpetuity to open space, recreational, instructional, or similar purposes. So looking at the prohibition against construction of a school versus the fact instructional services can occur there. So I think that's why staff is concluding that using the Furlane building for education, environmental education, and various other things is different from construction of a school and was within the allowance under the deed.
Yeah. Thank you, David. And again, the purpose and need for UGB expansion, we're proposing a concept plan that is an application requirement for the UGB application. And we believe it does meet the criteria under Metro Code. The concept plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the five-party intergovernmental agreement between the three cities, Metro and Clackamas County, as well as the three-city IGA that specifically authorizes Lake Oswego to initiate this type of planning or UGB expansion for Luscher Farm and the other city-owned open space properties in this area. And so with that, the staff does recommend approval of resolution. This is the prior resolution. We recommend approval of the resolution that is before you.
20.7.
2007. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions?
Questions?
I do.
Who's GC6? What's going on here? This recorder, who's GC6?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Who's GC6?
I think Teresa.
Oh,
Councilor Kohoff, you had a question, I think.
I have now become GC6 here.
The rapper.
So this is a question. I'll take it. This is a question, I think, for Director Siegel. I take it that J, turn to page 16 out of 37, J is Razik, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh.
No, you're good.
You're good now.
Yeah, that is Rasik property.
We're making headway. Okay, and presently, it is not in the UGB.
Oh, that's a good question. The Rasik property is in the UGB. It's not within the city's urban services boundary, which is an interesting problem. And we would need to amend the city's comprehensive plan to bring that in to our urban services boundary, but it is within the Metro UGB, if that makes sense.
And that's why it isn't included.
Correct.
In a land swap.
And we would make that correction or that amendment when the city amends its comprehensive plan to designate Luscher Farm.
Okay, but what is the net result of it being in the UGB but not your urban services? So if I wanted to, let's just say hypothetically, put my swimming complex there on Razik, would I have that use available to me?
Well, we would need to amend the comprehensive plan and apply the appropriate zoning, but yes,
Right.
it is within the UGB, so there's no question about whether the city needs the land for whatever the use might be. It's designated parks and natural areas in our comp plan.
Yeah, okay, got it, thank you.
If you have questions, raise your hand, will you,
Let's not go
Councilman
through.
Watt?
The first one is on the process. So if I got this right, you did a masterful job, the both of you and staff, pulling all these parts from different plans from the state all the way down into this. So this concept is for us to amend the UGB. It's not changing Luscher Farm, Luscher Area Master Plan right now, or the comp plan or zoning. We have to take step one, do this, get Metro to sign off, then we come back and do the comp plan. But then if I got it right, when we do comp plan and zoning changes, then we have to annex. We still can't do it. No.
No, you would have a choice at that point. In amending the comprehensive plan, you would designate parks and natural area, if that were your direction. It would position the city for annexing it, and if at the time that you annex it, then you would apply the zoning. You could do that concurrently. The only additional step that isn't required elsewhere in the city is that there's an election.
But I mean, if it was a whole year until that all came about for annexation, if Metro signs off, your department goes to work and changes comp plan and zoning, we pass it, we don't have to be annexed to do that. We can still do it because it's an extraterritorial area within the urban growth boundary. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Second one is, if you go to the map, Scott, you showed the one green one with 2020 concept plan area with the dashed lines around it, and I'm trying to think of the picture. It is
It's up
page
on
7
this.
of 37, but it was one of your earlier, there you go.
Okay.
Okay, so we're trying to get all of Lusher's parts and pieces squared up so we can do what we need to do to take the plan to the next step. But I'm still confused on the little knuckle that's sticking out that's not in. And also, I'm confused as to why Brock isn't in. And I know that in walking the site and knowing the site and reading the plan, there was even a chance if we had a small easement between the two parcels with the property owner, just to connect them from a trail standpoint, as a minimum, ideally, we'd get the whole property. But why isn't Brock in, and why, again, isn't the little knuckle in there?
Yeah, so Councilor Lamont, Brock is not proposed to come in with this application because the uses that are planned for Brock property and that are currently occurring on that lot are in compliance with county zoning, and more importantly, it's not contiguous to the area that we are proposing at this time.
So we're fine with that, and if we got a little easement, great. If we got another property in between, great, but it's not part of this. Okay.
Correct.
And last but not least, when you showed the master plan from the the master plan, the Luscher master plan, if you could go back to that drawing real quick, and if Director Anderholm could just give us a 2-second overview. When we go through our bond program in a little while from our Parks Advisory Board, we have a line item for things inside Luscher now to get done, and it was parking and some paths and things. Can you just hit it on the screen? What is it that we're going to be doing with that first initial funding, roughly?
There's two separate portions of it, but the initial need has been, and you're going to hear from the Parks Board a little bit later on this, is establishing our parking and a safe entrance to the property. I mean, that's
The big thing.
paramount need. And then beyond that is essentially setting up for expansion of urban agriculture and the expansion of environmental education programs.
That's the longer term. The shorter term is parking and pathway and roadway there.
Yes, to get that and to get people safely onto the property in a location is what I believe is the priority.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And just, I guess, one.
Councilman Whitlam?
So you can't do any of this until it's in
The house.
in-house, right?
We can actually do the entrance and the parking as basically it's accessory to the existing permitted uses. Because right now we have about 230 community garden plots plus a CSA. And if all 230 people showed up to their garden plots, we definitely have a parking issue. But more importantly than that is the site distance and the safety of the existing entrances to the farm property. So that's something that we need to address sooner than later.
And then the ability to use SDCs to fund improvements, you can
And
only
if
do
you'd
that
have
if
to
it's
do
in the
it.
city.
And just curiosity, I mean, other countries build cities in the amount of time that we take to get this done. Is this typical that it takes this long to, I mean, this is slowness at its finest.
5-year plan.
Just my,
It's not unusual. And if we were proposing to bring in land for residential development, believe me, it would be a 2 or 3 year process just to do a concept plan.
It'd be longer.
Well, just to get started, it'd be longer.
I mean, Lusher's been here, we've been talking about, I mean, we even have a friends group that's active and has plans. I just find it interesting that it takes this long. That's my only comment.
Well, I think the timing was really the key because until the city, well, the Lusher Area Master Plan was developed in it was adopted in 2013. The city was updating its comprehensive plan at that point. It was not feasible, I think, to take this step at that point. And there was uncertainty on the urban reserve area, which I think gave all of our, neighbors, Westland, Tualatin, certainly Clackamas County, some reservation about whether it was timely to bring more land into the urban growth boundary. The feedback from Metro at that point was that it wasn't timely.
Well, what I'm saying is it looks like a great plan,
Yeah.
and we're not going to vote on this until a year and a half from now. That, to me, is
Well,
unacceptable, frankly, but it is the system.
Okay.
Change it? That's right. What can we change? No, I'm just kidding.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there anybody who wants to testify in favor of this concept plan? Ms. Scrimshire?
I'll be brief. I'm Heidi Scrimshire with the Friends of Luscher Farm. And just to expand on what Director Siegel said, in 2011, there was talk about bringing Luscher into the UGB. There were a lot of us, I was one of them, who was opposed because we were in the process of working on the LAMP, the Luscher Area Master Plan, and we did not want to bring it into the city until we were guaranteed that the land was protected. And now that we have the LAMP, as you said, it's fabulous, we wholeheartedly support bringing the land in the UGB. And that will help us, in spite of the fact that it's going to take a year and a half, it will help us move forward with things that we want to do in the Luscher area that are not legally allowed right now.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wants to testify in favor of this? Is there anybody that wants to testify in opposition to this? Is there anybody that couldn't care less than neutral?
You have to listen to those, too.
In that case, the hearing is closed.
And I can move to adopt.
You can.
Thank you. I've learned. Move to adopt Resolution 20.07.
Second.
If I
Motion
may,
made and
Mayor.
seconded.
wait.
Mayor, again, as the recommendation came out, because we've had additional written testimony since this was before the Planning Commission, it's urged that you would instead adopt supplemental findings at your next meeting. So what the staff recommendation is that you today move to authorize staff to submit the plan as it's presented here together with its application to Metro, and then bring back supplemental findings for the final adoption of your resolution adopting the plan at the March 17th meeting.
All right.
Just a suggestion.
Yeah, what he said.
So move to adopt Resolution 20-07 with supplemental findings.
Right, to tentatively approve it and ask that it be brought back for adoption on March 17th.
On March 17th.
And in the interim, authorize staff to submit the plan as it is together with an application to Metro. Because that there's a March 15th deadline.
And in the interim, our city attorney will instruct staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And yada, yada, yada.
Exactly right.
I pronounce you, no.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think you just increased the time period by another half a year.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
There's been a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right.
It's wonderful.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Let's get her done.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go on to council business, the first thing being the Parks and Rec Advisory Board recommendations for bond project.
Did you have this implemented by Monday?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am essentially here to introduce the co-chairs of the Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resource Advisory Board, and they're here to present on the Recreation Aquatics Center and also bond project prioritization. So with that, Bill Gordon and Heidi Scrimshire, the two co-chairs.
First page. Hello again. One of the joys of living in Lake Oswego is the fact that so many citizens are engaged in the workings of the city. And I'm sure from your perspective, this can both be a blessing and a curse. As you may recall, in July of 2017, you all held a study session on the future of the municipal golf course. Shortly afterwards, the city worked with Robertson Sherwood Architects to identify a potential layout for an improved golf course and possible residential development in the location. A group of golf enthusiasts was also convened to give feedback. And in January of 2018, park staff presented design alternatives for reconfiguring the golf course along with a permanent home for the Parks and Rec facility. In 2018, the city conducted a community perception survey that showed overwhelming support for the bond, and as part of that bond, contributing to the development of the school district's pool. From there, as you know, the city and the school district hosted multiple open houses and has received feedback from citizens across the board, from swimming to indoor and outdoor recreation. The Parks Board has received feedback from all of these users and been presented with a myriad of alternatives. And after receiving 3 years of input, the Parks Board overwhelmingly supports the current plan that will go before you next when Ivan presents. This concept includes, do you want to go to the next? Includes combined recreation and aquatic center on the location of the golf course, a partnership between the city and the school district, and a budget of $30 million that's split equally between the city and the school district, and then a memo of understanding. And Bill is going to go over these in a little more detail.
Okay, so, excuse me, good evening. So we have just a couple short comments on the potential memorandum of understanding. We realize we're maybe a little bit ahead of ourselves here. But a couple key points, and I'm going to go through them really fast because I think really most of our time today is on the overall CIP prioritization and the allocation of bond monies. So first of all, up until this point with the task force, the school district has largely led the project on the aquatics and rec side. Hopefully, as Heidi says, hopefully that the school district and you folks will agree to proceed with the project, the concept project. And if you do, then we think it's important that the city take over in the senior partner role, not only for the capital project itself, but also the actual operations of the eventual center. Regarding the golf course site, we need to absolutely determine ASAP that that is the correct site. It's obviously a bit controversial. There's traffic impacts. So as quickly as possible, that site needs to be vetted. Ivan is obviously going to go into more detail next. A key assumption in the concept plan that you'll hear about next, that plan assumes about a $700 per square foot all-in construction cost. So there'll be a couple comments later about the opportunity that maybe that'll be lower. But as far as the memorandum of understanding, somewhere in that document there, it should be addressed that what would happen, God forbid, that the actual cost per square foot would be higher, such as equally splitting that excess. And then, of course, once the facility is built, there needs to be a solid operating loss sharing agreement. Normally, we'd like to say a nice gain share or loss share But in this case, I think it's pretty well understood that a facility like this would incur some level of operating loss. So there's got to be some fair, transparent, equitable way to share that loss. And then the last point, it's just kind of dangling out there. You might think, oh, what the heck is this gym doing here? The conceptual plan that you'll see does not include a gym, at least in this phase. We think that a gym would be a key addition, and I think the school district would agree with that. They happen to have, they being the school district, happens to have a modular gym at Lake Oswego Junior High. And a few things have to happen here, but not the least of which is that there has to be additional bond monies available for the school district to rebuild LO Junior High. But if that happens, then that modular gym would be available. And it's a full-size gym, and it could be transportable. And so that would be a good way to provide an element at the new center at the right cost to the city. So something to, again, think about in terms of the MOU. Okay, now we're really running far ahead here, but a couple quick points. Once, hopefully, the MOU is signed, a couple just quick considerations. One is that, in a way, the work at that point would begin, not end. And so there's going to there'll be a lot of input required from various parties. We would simply offer up the Parks Board to join in a potential new PAC to help get this project from the broad conceptual stage, which it obviously is now, to something that just comes in closer and closer, and we start to zero in on what it is that we want to do and that we can afford. And embedded in all that would be a heavy engineering effort because we're looking for, there's sweet spots everywhere here, but one sweet spot that we know we have to find is we need a utilitarian, solid facility that's going to pass the test of time. Lack of frills. It's just got to be a solid facility. The task force is, I know, operating on a minimum 30-year time horizon. I think we would all probably say that that is minimum for sure, and we want something that lasts longer. We also want to have a facility that's designed, or the site work, where if not everything can be done in effect, phase one, that there's siting for some potential phase two elements. On the revenue side, so the next bullet, oops.
Who are those characters?
I'm into Ivan, so sorry, Ivan.
Thunder.
There's the picture of you.
Bring home the bacon.
Success. So on the operating side, there's a target to a cost recovery target, at least one that's tabled right now, 70%, which appears to be generally an industry guideline. The only reason that we put this up here is that this will need, once the facility is built, this is going to require a lot of effort on the part of Parks and Rec staff. And so there's going to need to be some heavy analysis and a lot of work just to continue to try to not only reach, but in a perfect world, exceed that 70% cost recovery target. Then the last bullet, which in a way could have been the first bullet, is the sizing of the facility. Again, not to spend much time on this because Ivan's next. But we need to take a careful look at the sizing, not of the competitive pool, because that decision most likely has been made, and any change would most likely require the school district to take the lead on that. But as far as the warm water pool and then the dry rec sizing, it seems to us at this point that the sizing of both of those elements are, if anything, too small. And so we need to look at that, but within the context of what happens to the budget. So from that perspective, what could we do now to make the facility perhaps a little bit bigger to satisfy the needs in the community, or set the stage for a potential phase 2? So that is all that we had on the one project, the Aquatics and Rec Center project. Now, we have presented a spreadsheet like this several times in the past. It's it's life through spreadsheets, and I can take you through this pretty quickly. But what this spreadsheet does is it looks at what might be available money, could even be likely available money for parks capital projects over the next 5 years. And then it looks at the highest priority projects that are listed along the left column, top to bottom. So those are the projects, top to bottom. And then across the top is where the money to pay for those projects would be sourced from. You can see that the total, I'm a little gun shy of where I thought the,
Nope.
gun shy for a good reason.
You might have to read it.
Yeah.
Just tell us.
Yeah.
So the total amount of money that likely would be available would be around $60 million, half from the bond or bonds, and then the rest coming from several other potential sources. The top priority projects, you have already approved funding out of the bond. It's that repair and replace subtotal line. The total is a little over $9 million. You've approved $5 million. There are several specific projects at the ACC, a tennis center, and then several other parks, upgrades, restrooms, et cetera. This is in the category of taking care of what we own. And then we also included that future projects line, simply because we don't want to forget to thank you for approving the demolition fee or the demolition tax, which provides for the first time secure funding for future repair and replace items in the parks network. It's a 3-year commitment, so it's not forever. But we're anticipating that over the next few years that'll generate close to $3 million, and even though the projects aren't identified, almost guaranteed they'll come up. So continuing on down the left side, the big project, of course, is the rec center and the pool. So you can see the $30 million there. Our $15 million, which we have split up or sourced by bond monies at 11, SDCs at 3, And then there's $1 million available for planning and design work that is already approved in the department's budget. And then, of course, in the other category or column is the $15 million from the school district. Well, the project isn't really quite $30 million right out of the blocks. It's really closer to 33 because we are supporting the siting of this project at the golf course, which means that the golf course is going to need some work, and we're really happy that the department and Dan Hickson are holding a meeting in a couple of days to really start to more fully embrace the golf community. We know that they're concerned, but indications are that for $3 million, the current course designed by the hockey player, minor league hockey player at that, can be redesigned and reconfigured into more of an executive 9-hole course, proper drainage, spacing between the holes, brand new greens, and a driving range that fits the bill. And so the hope is that with more input directly with the golfing community and the professional group involved with Ivan and crew, that this part of the project can be highly valued as well. So that then produces a $33 million project based on the concept. So then the projects that we value and are included as part of the bond spend continuing on down include the construction of new fields at Rasique. So those would be rectangular fields to help address the known shortage of athletic fields in the community. Then below that, and that's $7 million, 3.5 each from bonds and SDCs. And then we have a one-liner, acquisitions and trails. We could have probably put a couple individual projects under there, but suffice it to say that the citizens value the ability to make strategic land purchases, and also they value connectivity. And so we've got on our sheet here almost $5 million allocated to those activities. And a key point is that with the recent passage of the Metro Parks Bond, natural area bond, Lake Oswego's slice is about $2 million. So this is an opportunity to leverage Metro money on one or more projects in that category. Ivan talked about the next one briefly, Luscher access and parking. So we think that's a very high priority project. And then below that, there's another Luscher project, urban ag, environmental education, roughly $2 million. A lot of work needs to be done to scope that out. But we think that's an important project. Then below that, turfing, George Rogers and Westlake infields. After the resounding success at Waluga, we think that this is almost like getting new fields in a way. And then Tryon Cove is the bottom project on this list. Again, there's a metro element here. So think about it as the pedestrian bridge and maybe some improvements actually in Tryon Cove. But because This is part of Metro's Willamette Greenway prioritization. It's likely that Metro would make a significant contribution to that project. So that's the way all of this kind of flows from top to bottom, but you'll notice there are a couple asterisks on those last three items. The reason that those are asterisked is that at this point, nobody knows how much the rec center and the aquatic center will cost. There's the conceptual budget, but that project needs to be right-sized, as we indicated, and it's not unlikely that it would be enlarged to some extent. So that's the reason that those last three projects are starred. It provides potentially another up to $5 million of bond funding if whatever was changed to the concept plan traded off well with those three projects. Also, perhaps we won't need to do that because there are opportunities for improvements in the costing. I mentioned a little bit earlier that the $700 per square foot estimate, I think OPSIS, the architects, would say it's reasonable, but the high side of reasonable. God knows we don't want it higher, but we'll take lower. And so there's an opportunity, for example, if the all-in cost came in $50 less per square foot, that's $2+ million of availability. Also, if the inflation, the assumed inflation rate between today and next year at this time isn't as great, that's an opportunity. And then the last opportunity in that kind of that broad area is that the $30 million bond that was passed, overwhelmingly, it's likely that we will enjoy some type of premium like the school district has enjoyed on their bond once the actual bond is placed because of the city's creditworthiness and all of that. So you never know, but the finance department thinks that could raise maybe another couple of million. So the 30 could be 32, plus or minus. So there's maybe some upside potential there. You'll see that there's no money allocated from the general fund. A little premature for that. And then a quick comment on the SDCs column that totals $8.3 million. That is based on the estimated SDCs available over the next 5 years and already includes or subtracts previously approved projects like Iron Mountain and Woodmont, although it does assume that Woodmont's actual cost will be less than what was approved several years ago. So that's the list, that's the prioritization and where we think the money can come from. The next page, these poor projects, they're good projects, but they just didn't make page one. So it's another close to 18 million. So on top of the 60 million from the first page, it's close to $80 million worth of parks projects. The good news is that over the next 5 years, if everything happens the way we think that it can, we can address 3/4 of that money. And then, of course, over time, these projects, maybe some will go away, maybe there'll be others that'll come in, but the stage will be set maybe to pick off a few of these projects, and certainly not in the next year or two, but maybe over the next 5, 6, 8 years. So that's it. Heidi.
I get to go closer. Well, as y'all are well aware, this is, sorry. As you all are well aware, this is a unique opportunity for the city and the school district to partner when we both have all these bond monies floating around. And we really hope that you all will approve the comprehensive recreation center and approve it in the optimal location, which we personally think is a golf course, but we welcome your feedback on this. And thank you for your time.
Peter, you want questions on this part?
That was just the short beginning. Ivan is starting.
Now the long beginning
Are you
starts.
going to proceed, or should we ask?
No, you can go ahead and ask questions.
Questions, anybody? Counselor Manns?
There's this assumptions in here on SDCs over the next 5 years. We do not know what is going to happen with the economy, if in fact the building market will soften, which some economists are saying will happen. Obviously, that will impact what we're doing here. Has that been taken? Oh, sorry, thank you. I mean, you can't hear me out there with without my microphone. Has that been taken into account as worst-case scenario?
No, I would not. This is not the worst-case scenario. What I would say is that the Parks Board has brought this type of chart to you folks in the past.
Yes.
And we would anticipate continuing to do that. It's just, it's always dynamic. And if it looks like the SDC, the incoming SDCs are reduced, that is going to obviously have, in theory, maybe not even in theory, but in practicality, an impact starting from the bottom of that column working up.
Okay, and the second question quickly, if I may, is on the Metro bond, are there any strictures on those monies that we would be getting? Or that's an Ivan question. I'll defer and wait for Ivan. Thank you.
Counselor Lamont?
Can Ivan answer it?
I can answer it right now.
Okay.
So on the
As you
2
like.
million direct pass-through, the basic requirements of that are connecting people to nature and acquisition of properties that have habitat significance. Those are the two basic. They're still working out the other criteria that'll have to be met to make projects eligible.
Thank you.
Counselor Lamont?
2 questions, just to clarify, because I think I got the answer, but Ivan, Iron Mountain Park and Woodmont Park are not in that 8.3 million. That's already budgeted from the past, right?
Yes,
Okay,
and
so-
then the number that, I can answer a little bit about that. The number that created the 8.3 is using our finance department's conservative estimate on SDCs.
For the next 5, and so
For
they're
the
not
next-
programmed unless they're
Yes.
programmed here. And then if there is a savings on Woodmont, which we think we are going to have, is that going to add on to the 8.3, or is that
No.
budgeted already?
It's already included based on what we saw on Woodmont, where it came in.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in this 8.3. The extra money off of Woodmont goes in
Yes,
this.
it
Okay.
is.
And then a bigger question for City Manager Bennett. So tonight, we're getting this discussion going. We're kind of at the goal line here, and we got to get going. We're just discussing tonight. When are we going to approve this?
So your goal, our goal tonight for you is to make sure you get any questions on the table that you need to answer. I think you saw the broad outlines from the Parks Board of what the elements are going to be in a proposed IGA with the school district. Your next time you see this will be to actually have the discussion with the school district. And then at that meeting, we anticipate that both boards will give us direction about whether you want to proceed or not. So please don't make a decision tonight, because we want you to do that together after you've had some discussions of the draft term sheet. But I do need to know, are there questions that remain unanswered for you that we can make sure you get answered before your March 16th meeting?
Counselor Kohoff?
So my question, and I'm not sure who is supposed to answer it, so you volunteer. I understand that this has been set up with 2 subtotals, well, 3 subtotals. And my concern and question is, are we saying that these are like silos? Are these directed funds that we're saying, okay, we've got $2,500,000. Just look at the bonds and not all the rest. Are we saying that that is what we have to spend and not a penny more? And that the reason I ask that is as you get below subtotal 2, you've got the fields. Are we saying that that $3,500,000 is segregated out for new fields? Or are we saying, you know, we're going to start from the top and we're going to get what we need to do at each point? And then if we need a little more money, we're going to keep going down until we run out of money. So some of those projects, as you go further down, are not going to get funded.
Yeah, there's, why don't I'd take a shot at this first. So this is the Parks Board recommendation. And obviously, we've starting, you know, the higher up you are on the list, the higher the priority. But there are a number of unknowns on this page. Most of the projects, including a couple of the top projects, the repair and replace projects, the exact costs aren't known. And so they're close on those, but as you get farther down, and obviously with the big project, there's a conceptual budget, but even those numbers are going to change. So I think to answer your question, Councilor Kohlhoff, I think we would say, obviously start the top, work your way down. It's likely, in our opinion, that the city could address the projects through the new fields, so include that RESEEK project, and still have significant monies available if there was something else that came up that maybe wasn't even on any of these pages.
But my question isn't that. I got that. But my question is, are these, like my mother used to get the paycheck and she put them in envelopes, and she only purchased food from the envelope that said food. And if she ran out of money there, she didn't get into the other envelopes. That's what I'm a little concerned about, because that sounds a lot like what you're trying to set up here.
Thank you. So, there could be a bit of movement between left and right. So it doesn't mean that, for example, the RESEEK field, this doesn't have to be 3.5 and 3.5. It could be, 4 and 3 or something else.
I'm talking up and down. You see what I'm getting at? I'm talking about supposing we get to first subtotal and we've run out of money. We have, because that's what it took. We decided that
So I think their recommendation is essentially if you don't have enough money, you cut from the bottom. Do you see what?
Yes.
I think that's what they're recommending. And let me also just say briefly that some of those categories of funds are not interchangeable. There are things on that list that you cannot spend SDC money on. There are things on that list you cannot spend Metro bond money on. So there is some flexibility between the columns both directions, but not a lot. But no one's asking you tonight to say we are approving $7 million for RESEEK. I think this is a question of, is this generally the right order and the right order of magnitude for where we're headed with bond dollars?
And the left is based on our engineers or parks directors' estimates. These aren't just numbers plucked out of the sky. You guys have been working on these for a long time.
Yeah, those are estimates.
Okay.
Correct.
Councilor Mans?
Quick question. On the, and this is the PowerPoint, this would be directed to Director Anderholm, the PowerPoint that we received
It's coming
later in the
next.
day?
It's coming next.
Oh, is that next?
It's coming next, yes.
Then break.
And we're going to take a break for about 10 minutes.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been almost 2 hours.
That worked. Thanks, Kent.
Oh, well.
next week. Further, move on, my friend.
Drop the mic.
Back in session.
Onward and upward.
Mr. Annerholm, I think you have some information to pass on to us.
Yes. Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm here, Ivan Anderholm, Parks and Recreation Director. The purpose that I'm here this evening is to go through an informational slideshow for you that basically explains where the Pool and Recreation Center Task Force is and explains some of their public outreach. Information that's not in there is that through the task force process, the school district and the city and task force members did do some evaluation of 4 different sites within the community. I believe that was presented to council previously. So what you're going to see tonight in this is kind of the result of the process that the task force has gone through and also what the task force heard when engaging with the community. I do want to say one other thing that's not in there is one of the tenets of this and what came out of the task force and what was asked by the council and the school district board when the task force kind of got together was to look at and answer the question of efficiency. And I do want to address that before I get into the slideshow. It is in your council report, but for those that don't have the council report in front of them, I do want to say that both on the capital side and on the operational side, it was found that a combined facility does create efficiency. The estimated efficiency of building one facility that houses both swimming pools and dry recreation is between $4 and $6 million, depending on the scope of that project. And then it was also calculated by Ballard King, which is a subconsultant to the consultant group, that there's a savings of around $275,000 annually by operating one facility as opposed to 2 separate facilities. So I just wanted to do that, and now I'm going to go ahead and get into the deck. I'm going to go through these, and if you wouldn't mind, at the end, I'll take some questions. Okay, so what we know, those of you that are on the task force understand these, but I'm going to go over them really quickly. The guiding principles of the task force as it looked at the possible partnership between the school district and the city, we're looking at a 30-plus year facility that it accommodates the needs of the existing users, both from a pool perspective and a dryland perspective. It creates efficiencies both from a capital standpoint and operational standpoint. The total investment of $30 million split 50-50 between the city and the school district. A target of 70% operational cost recovery, that the project is adaptable for future opportunities. And I do want to stress that these were principles that were developed by the ad hoc task force, and neither the city council nor the school board have taken any formal action on those principles. So during public engagement, the consultant group along with the task force put together some community engagement where we invited specific user groups to come and testify about their impressions of where the process and what the project was looking like. Those user groups on January 30th came in and spoke primarily about the dry land things. So we had representatives from the golf, pickleball, basketball, rowing, dance, yoga, fitness, the nearby neighborhood associations, including Palisades, McVeigh, and Hallinan, and then also time for unaffiliated users to come up and give comment. We did another session, listening session, on February 3rd, and that one was centered primarily around the swimming community. So we had representatives from competitive swimming, competitive water polo, community and lap swimmers, swim instruction, lifeguard, water safety, and also unaffiliated. And then on February 12th, the input that was heard was reflected back out in an open house that was fairly well attended. And we are actually awaiting the final written synopsis of that. This is just the participants. On the left-hand side, you'll see that the superintendent's pool task force all of the names that were involved in that. And then on the right-hand side is the Joint Ad Hoc Task Force. So the proposed concept for the Recreation and Aquatic Center at the $30 million. So where everything is leading to this, and again, we're not asking for a decision on this, just questions and some discussion, would be developed at the LO Municipal Golf Course site, incorporating existing assets, and what that's referring to is repurposing the existing clubhouse into both dry recreation space and then also a rentable space for community events. The center would include a stretched 25-yard, 12-lane. You'll see later it might be a 13-lane pool, a warm water pool, activity spaces for large exercise room and multi-purpose classroom, and offices for parks and recreation. Also included in this would be obviously the lobby, the support facilities, including locker rooms and restrooms for the public. The project would be funded $15 million from the school district and $15 million from the city. And then without the district or city partnership, there is no new pool. This is the deck that we shared both with the Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resource Advisory Board and the school board. I think that what that truly means, if I can interpret that, is that without the partnership, it's more than likely that the school district is looking at a renovation of their existing pool and the existing site with the resources that they have available. The concept of this would rely heavily on a memorandum of understanding between both LO School District and the City of Lake Oswego. The full facility with add-ons. In public testimony we heard, and I'm going to get into the detail a little bit here, that there basically everybody that came to testify both on the dry side and on the wet side of the facility, surprise, surprise, want more. So what you have here is the full facility with add-ons, and you'll notice from the previous slide, if you look at the facility and you look at the area that's highlighted in red, is you see an additional cardio weight workout area, an additional classroom, and a gymnasium. The conceptual program design with capital and operating costs is right at $30 million. And then the annual subsidy is estimated at $404,000. This does not include off-site improvement costs at this point. The reason that it does not is because those have not been completely identified what they are at this point. I do want to note on this because to let you know how quickly things are evolving. The latest conversation that we had with the architect group, OPSIS, that we're working with on this, on cost escalation that they're getting from their cost estimators, is that the more realistic escalation to the first quarter of 2021 for building is 4% instead of 8%. So just to let you know, that's not reflected in this slide, but constantly, and going back to what the Parks Board said, constantly things are changing. And so that's something that as a project moves forward, there is some pliability if the project moves forward. What we heard on the site. So when we talked specifically about the site and people came up to talk about the site, we had golfers that were opposed to locating the new facility at the golf course. We did have some golfers that welcomed the opportunity to create a 9-hole course. The majority of the neighbors coming through the neighborhood, when the neighborhood spoke, were in support of the golf course site for a facility. All of them had concerns with traffic and how traffic was going to be addressed. The swimmers did support overwhelmingly the new facility at the golf course. Overwhelmingly, the dry land users supported the siting at the golf course. And then the golf course improvements are outside the $30 million project budget. And you heard from the Parks Board earlier that those would be something outside of. The golf course site considerations, number one on that is address traffic issues, identify exactly what those are and be able to address them. I do want to emphasize the second one, which is improve the golf course. improve the functionality of the golf course is the goal of the city. The golf course is something that the city council has spoken on and holds in high regard as a public function. The uniqueness of this site, when you look at the golf course site, is that it creates a recreation campus experience. And by that, with proximity to Lake Ridge High School, Azalea Field, possible additional fields either at Luscher or Rosique, you start to get a synergy of a very well put together campus experience. I will say that our evaluation that takes into account both the Palisades site, the school district site, our written parking agreements that we have both with the LDS Church and the C3 Church, and existing parking on both the golf course and Azalea Field. Right now, within that circle, there are over 1,000 public parking spaces without any additional being added for anything additional that would be there. So it is a unique area. Operationally, it's inefficient, where both pool functions, dry land functions, and golf functions could be operated from a centralized single desk. There's some synergy because of the clubhouse and the proximity and the repurposing of that. That building itself is about 4,700 square feet with a 3,000 square foot great room that is currently dividable. And then potential shared parking with a golf course. And then it's adaptable for future opportunities. And that has more to do with a more in-depth look at improvements to the golf course and what portions of the property may or may not be included in golf course improvements. What we heard from the dryland community, and this is the same for both dryland and for pool users, every group demands more amenities than fit the budget. There was a desire expressed to prioritize a gym now. And then the question, could the gym accommodate a variety of program activities? And could the budget accommodate more programs? That's moving a project forward from this concept design into design development is really where you start to answer that second question, or that last question. Palisades neighborhood, improve the traffic and safety. Hal and Ann, they spoke a lot about the gym and the warm water desire. Pickleball group, they want more and more and more. I think Councilor O'Neill can attest to pickleball. Basketball group, they came and spoke and they want more basketball. They're finding that they're still having young youth that are, starting basketball practice at 8 p.m. in our local school gyms. The rowing community came forward. They probably of all the groups was the boldest and most direct and said, we want a 3,600 square foot facility that's dedicated to rowing and access to the competition pool for training. And then the golf user groups basically said the facility would compromise the golf course. What we heard from the aquatics group, really similar here. Every user group demands for more amenities than fit the budget. They asked that we confirm the pool usage data. I can say that work has happened since this question came up. The data that was put into the lane hours that are needed for the pool was confirmed. It was actually numbers that were provided by the swimming community, by their groups. Does include room for growth, and that's what was calculated in the Ballard King numbers. Accommodate lifeguard and water safety training. The initial concept that was presented didn't have any water deeper than 7 feet. And in order to train lifeguards and actually teach diving off of starting blocks, you need to have at least 9 feet of water. So that's something. Consider the skinny 50-meter pool. One of the sub-consultants, Ballard King, was asked to look into that, and there's a subsequent memo that was released on that. Basically comparing the skinny 50-meter pool to a stretch 25 and what the usage of that, the capacity of that, and also the operating conditions of that would be. Verify if larger pool would increase revenue was a question. That was also answered in the memo. Could budget accommodate more programs? That, again, I think I answered that on the last slide. When you get into design development, that's where you actually figure that out. Account for rental fees spent at other pools. Consider different pool programming configurations. A new pool would attract more users after hours. And then the competition pool users and youth aquatic clubs asked for an 8-lane 50-meter pool with deep water for lifeguard training. Their proposal was actually kind of a skinny 50-meter pool. Aquatics instruction, a 5-lane warm water pool, and then lap swimmers in the community, 6 lanes to support the needs-based programming. I'm going to get into a little bit of the configurations that came out of based on this input. So this is the warm water pool consideration. This is essentially a 4-lane, 25-yard pool, 3.5 feet to 5 feet of depth, integrated lap lanes, supports lap swimming, learn to swim, water aerobics, therapy classes, and allows for recreational swimming. It would be a pool that would be between 84 and 86 degrees. Competition pool considerations. Available funding supports the stretch 25-yard pool. Serves the high schools as the first priority, which is the LO swimming, LO water polo, along with the Lake Ridge teams. Serves the community needs, which is the second priority, which is the club water polo, club swimming, swim lessons, etc. On the competition pool, it would be both swim lessons as well as the warm water pool. You would see that taking place in both of those. Accommodates spectator seating, and the water temperature is a couple degrees cooler. 1 degree of water temperature equals 5 degrees of air temperature to what you feel. So that's why it's significant, even though it's only 4 degrees different. Accommodates lifeguard safety training, so a portion being at least 9 feet deep, and then rental fees will not offset the increased operating costs of the larger pool. The adaptable stretch 25-yard pool, and this diagram is important. I think this is more of the analysis of how the pool could be configured. And as a point, this is basically an 8,000 square foot pool, 104 by 75. 3'6" to 9'6" of water depth. The 3'6" is really at the bottom of the stairs on the little portion that jets out it would be your right end of the pool, this section. The rest of the pool, as you get into the lap lanes here, is going to be approximately 7 feet deep. And the reason for that is when you look at the water polo championship course, we need a minimum depth of 7 feet for it to be a certified championship course. This pool is very versatile. You'll see that it's 25 yards and 25 meters. 25 meters is what swim clubs swim. They swim 50 meters, 25 meters, they swim in meters. High school athletics, OSAA, swim in yards. When this pool is being considered for that, and I'm going into a little detail here, when teams are swimming in it for working out, the reason that the pool is 25 yards wide and is considered a 25-yard stretch pool is that competitors and people working out actually swim across. They swim across the pool, and that's where you get the 12 to 13 lanes, depending on the width of the lane. During competition, they'll swim in the 8 lanes going this way. So that's why it's called a 25-yard stretch. Again, spectator seating, 300. It has a bulkhead, which allows you to change the configuration. It's a thing that gets moved. You can see it moves to different directions. It does allow for one competition water polo course, but does also allow for 2 smaller courses, so both high school teams could practice at the same time, and then does allow enough depth for diving for lifeguard training. The next steps is to receive some feedback from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. This presentation was given to them on February 18th. Earlier tonight, you heard some of their feedback on the presentation. We are updating you now with the community engagement feedback. The school board had this same presentation on the 24th, Monday the 24th. The next step also would be to finalize the program, design concept, capital and operational costs as they stand now. And then for the task force to present a final recommendation to the school board and the city council at your joint meeting on March 16th. Moving beyond that, if the two boards decide to move forward, obviously, assembling a project advisory committee that includes stakeholders and elected officials. And then also, our recommendation is that we engage a golf course designer, which we do have a meeting set up with Dan Hickson of Hickson Golf Design, actually on Thursday evening from 6 to 8 at the maintenance center to take a initially look at the opportunities and constraints of the existing course. With that, I'm open to questions.
Councilor Mans?
Yes, on your slide, number 6, conceptual program design with capital and operational costs. You explained the escalation to construction, the decrease in that, and I appreciate that. My concern and my question to you is the asterisk of does not include off-site improvement costs, which could, based on my very limited knowledge, be as much or more as the facility itself, depending upon what needs to be done.
I wouldn't go as far as saying that it would be as much or more than the facility. No.
A third to half of the facility.
Let's not throw numbers out.
No.
Get the numbers.
I
Yes.
think that would be my advice, is let's
Right.
not guess. Let's go do the work that's required to do a traffic study and an evaluation of what the offsites would be. Because at that point, you could make a decision as a council about whether you still wanted to procead with the project.
And you'll have that to us before the next meeting.
Not before the 16th, no. We won't have a traffic study completed in that
Okay.
time.
When do you suppose we will?
When's the plan to have that done?
It's part of the next phase of completing the work. I don't know. I can't tell you exactly tonight when that would be done, but I know that it's being worked on right now by Kittleson and Associates. So the work is being done right now, the traffic analysis. We will have, I will say, and I'll commit to this, prior to the 16th, we will have at least an early estimate of what the range of those off-site improvement costs will be. We will have that available both to the city council and the school board prior to the 16th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Kohlhoff?
So it was explained to me, and I wanted to run it by you, what that skinny 50 was. That seems to me to be a possibility for a win-win, because that's 6 lanes, and then the full 40, so that's 6 lanes, 48 feet wide, 164 feet long. So that gives the competitive swimming people the possibility for short and long course. The 25 stretch would be 8 lanes, 75 feet wide, with a length of 104 feet. What I was told was that actually is the same amount of water. It's about 7,200 square feet of water. And that would be the same footprint. You could work that in even at the golf course, which is not my favorite, without changing anything. Would you agree with that? If they were to, if the competitive people said we would buy in and not be miserable with this skinny 50, would you agree that that is 6 of one, half dozen of another?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but I believe that we do have some documentation from Ballard King that we'll make available to council that analyze the skinny 50-meter pool and the stretch 25, and did have some conclusions that were based both on capital cost and also operational.
And
Well-
without ducking the question, I just want to remind you all that when we went forth to proceed on exploring this concept, you told us that the decisions around the size of the competitive tank are the school districts. And so we have been very careful to respect that it's not our decision to make about what size the competitive tank will be.
And with all respect, I agree with that. What I'm curious about, because we want people to be buying in,
Yeah.
if you agreed that, and we have the Ballard King, we have the Councilman Hunziker report, we've got all those reports. I went back home and got a bunch of reports over the last 3-4 years. But my question to you was, do you think that that can still fit in that footprint if, in fact, it stays at the golf course, as you're proposing?
Are you asking if the pool was not a 25-yard stretch and if it was a 50-meter skinny pool,
Yeah.
would the building still fit on the golf course in the concept? Is that the question?
It is.
But it wouldn't accommodate the water polo group.
No, it's,
Yeah, but I mean, not getting into the semantics of the pool, I think that the site itself could probably entertain that. I don't think that the site is so constrained that going from a 104-foot to 170-foot or whatever it is pool is going to push it beyond the property lines or constrain
so
the
can I
site.
ask one more question, or you want me to wait? I have one more
Yeah, go
question.
ahead.
The other question okay, hang on. The other question I had was, I realized that through all these various studies, people have looked at the different sites, starting with Lake Ridge and so forth. Other than the thought that the infrastructure costs would add up too much, what was the prohibition or the downside of Rizik? It seems to have just dropped
More
out.
council direction, I mean, the sense that that the plan was to use it for ball fields as opposed to using it for this. I mean, you all can talk about, I think Rosica is big enough to accommodate the facility, but I think the direction we got in the winnowing process last fall was essentially that we wanted to use that property for other uses. As I say, you all can talk about that.
Correct.
It's not a technical issue.
Okay,
Or new
that was the
fields.
question.
Councilor Lamont.
Right.
Councilor Lamont.
Okay, if I got this right also too, is to try and get this thing moving. The 25-yard stretch was coming out of the 2 task forces, the studies by the 2 or maybe 3 different consulting groups. And then when some of us went and met in Newburgh and toured the site, after we walked through the doors to the competitive pool without anybody saying a word, the director of the Parks Department, our district, who is similar size to us population-wise, he's been to 40 or 50 pools. He's built 4 pools. He said, I would recommend a 25-yard stretch, and that district is serving 2 high schools and 2 or maybe 3 colleges, Linfield, George Fox, and somebody else. So I think comfort-wise from our side, this makes sense because you're sizing the whole complex together to make a concept that we'll refine as we get the park and advisory and group together. So I think if you're telling me that we can accommodate competitions and amazingly to 2 schools practicing at the same time, because they would be getting out about the same time, not just one sitting for an hour and then the other. And there's room for water polo and for diving and for lifeguard certification and police and fire and everybody else. This seems to be the box that I think we're probably needing to go to. We're going to make that decision we get with the school district. The second thing is the golf course. I think, again, through a long process of winnowing it out, we haven't found a bigger site to handle all this. But I think the other side of the coin is all the adjacencies and synergies that we're going to get, including with the golf shack that's out there now, the building, and the fact that it's literally next door to the high school, and kids can walk across like they do now with Lake O High School. And we're going to be getting into a major road and a minor collector rather than a major road and a local street where 2 access points. So I think we just have to keep that in mind. And my last thing would be is I think it'd be helpful if we could take the 9-hole golf course concept that we already have, that we've been seeing, and put it with the larger plan, you know, the bigger concept, so we can see the whole thing together. I think a lot of people will feel better that, yeah, we can get that 9-hole concept in with this campus, and everybody's working off a major recreation center then. That would be helpful for us when we get the 2 entities together.
Councilor Wendland.
Well, I know this is not a question, this is a statement. Thank you to the Parks and Rec Board
Yes.
for working very hard on this, and to everybody that showed up to all the open house meetings. I think it was a very informative process, and I enjoyed it very much, and I think we got a lot of good input. But thanks, Parks and Rec Board, for carrying through. I guess my question is on the operating agreement, are we going to have kind of the basics of what we'll have that from a staff level, what you feel that you can?
On the 16th, that's our goal, is to have the major terms and some recommendations to both boards about what would the major terms be, because there are the issues related to capital construction, capital maintenance, and then operating, and there's a bunch of things that we need to exchange proposals on before the 16th.
Okay, and then I guess my recommendation on that is it gives us a chance to change the paradigm a little bit and make sure that everyone is doing the best part that they can in their wheelhouse, meaning that community schools should be education-focused, and Parks and Rec and the city should be activity and recreational focused, and draw a hard line, because coincidentally, this weekend, I was talking to somebody about that, and they said they're all confused as to who to call for what they're supposed to do. And I said, well, you know what? We're working on that. And they thought it was a clear path if we stayed in our own lanes. So I think that should be a part of your conversation.
Councilor Nguyen.
Dr. Anderholm, you had mentioned that I'm not advocating for this, but
Move it over, so.
I'm not advocating for this particular option, but I had a question. You said that if we can't come up with a memorandum of understanding between the city and the school district, then there's not going to be a pool like this at all, right? And the other option is if we don't do this, the school district will renovate the existing facility.
My understanding is it's not about if there's not a memorandum of it. Basically the city council and the school board acting if they want to go into a partnership that leads this way. Mm-hmm. The indication from the task force and what we've been working on is that more than likely, if there isn't a way to move forward together, that the district would be looking at renovating their existing pool in the existing site. So,
I mean, I've always heard that they're going to demolish it because it's not safe and things like that. But so that's Plan B.
It would be a big renovation. It wouldn't be it's almost a replacement in site. But I think that there are some reusable without getting into the details. But that's the indication that we've got in the task force from the school district members that are on that task force is kind of where they're at.
But then that would limit. Well, we as a city couldn't use the facility for our activities.
We currently don't program the Parks and Recreation Department or the city. We're not involved in the programming of the pool that's at the high school currently.
In fact, the existing IGA explicitly says that we have no role in programming the existing swimming pool. Yeah.
And little kids couldn't learn over in that big pool, and no.
Well, they do.
They do. They offer learn to swim programs.
Preschool kids are in that pool?
They do, currently, yes.
Wow.
It's just cold.
I can't stitch.
Didn't you see Blue Lagoon?
Yeah, I feel constrained because we're going to be making a decision soon to say a few words. I'd like you guys to think long and hard about this. I've been on the financial part of this through the Budget Committee since 2009 and now on the council. And all that time, council did not want to spend any money on the pool, the school district's pool, particularly not operations and maintenance. We passed a $30 million bond, and now everybody wants to spend it on a pool. There's an $80 million CIP. And I suspect that a number of people in the community, because we didn't have a large portion of the community at any of these open houses, but I think there's a large portion of the community that would be surprised to know that we're spending $15 million or half of our bond on a pool and recreation center. I don't have a problem with a recreation center. I think we need a home for the Parks and Rec people, but I have a real problem with us spending this kind of money on a pool. And I recognize there's efficiencies in putting a pool here right next to the rec center, but we didn't spend the money, the $10 million or whatever it is on the pool, that would make up for a lot of inefficiencies. I don't think we'll ever make up that $10 million by savings on efficiencies. So I think it's too bad. I think we're going to be putting in $200,000 or $300,000 a year building that into our budget for at least that much for the next 30 to 50 years, and I hope we don't end up regretting it. Thanks for listening to me. Anybody else? Councilor Wendland, you're going to respond, I'm sure.
Well, you and I respect each other very much, and I think the city has asked for this for a long time. I think this is an opportunity, it's once in a lifetime, where both parties can join together and build a good project. I think there's a synergy that's important, and I will tell you that I've had almost unequivocally positive comments from people who are excited that we're spending taxpayer money in a partnership with the school district to ensure that we're minimizing silos and creating efficiencies. And I think it's important for us to think maybe a little bit big picture. And to Councilor Lamont's suggestion, Ivan has made a kind of an overlay of what the recreation complex for Lake Oswego could be with Receipt, Luscher, this new facility, and I think this will serve our community well. And we may differ on this, but we do. But I still respect you immensely.
Thank you. That makes me feel a lot better.
Oh, good. Of course, he doesn't respect me, but that's okay.
Not so, not so. Councilor Mans. I didn't mean to get us into a speechifying thing, but if you need to, go for it.
Yeah, let's
Well,
go.
thank you. I appreciate that. I'll make it short. Not citing any numbers, I do want to once again, and I've said this over and over again, reiterate my concerns, not about a pool, but about the siting and the infrastructure that will be required, especially from a traffic standpoint, to accommodate this fabulous center that we're talking about. Many people in West Lynn, for example, are extraordinarily excited that Lake Oswego is building a pool, if you follow nextdoor.com. Be that as it may. So I would like to caution in going forward, and I do appreciate the clarification that we will have some idea of what that infrastructure will cost, and hopefully what, at least in the abstract, it will look like, and what potential partners we may have, Clackamas County, to make that happen. So that's my speech. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Lamont.
Two things. One is following up what I asked for as far as if we could put the golf course in there, and what John Wendland just said. Ideally, we'd see the whole thing, the Luscher master plan future, the Receipt layout that you've already done with your department, and the golf course, and this to show the whole picture and everybody can see it. But I think differently too. I think we have got a demand pent up in this city for swimming, golf, rowing, lacrosse, baseball, softball, and we are not meeting it. We're a city of 40,000 almost, named Lake Oswego, and we are long overdue to upgrade our facilities, and we can do better, and we can attract more use, and we can attract more fees and funds into the city and tournaments and regattas and everything else. So we are long overdue. I remember sitting in the audience as a planning commissioner, councilor-elect, in December of 2016 after I got elected, and listening to Councilor O'Neill and Councilor Gustafson talk robustly about what a pool is for the city and how many more people would go to that than when you add golf and other things together. So I think we need to serve the people for park and recreation, including these sports, and do it wisely. And as Councilor Wendland has said time after time, we have a golden opportunity. The planets are lining up to have this partnership to make it work. And we will work diligently. We already know that when it comes to our side of the equation, we have to start the design process in detail but flesh it out with our own team. And that will be a chance for our Parks Advisory Board and our community to really start to put the pencil to what we need in that facility. How does it work on a day-to-day basis for you, for us, for the residents? So I am confident that we didn't pass this $30 million bond to do whatever. When you look at that list, what is more powerful than a pool and recreation complex for this city? And we have no home for the recreation and parks right now. So I think it's time to get this thing going and get it bid out. I think a lot of us think that the numbers are high, and we can deal with that as we get a new concept cleaned up, and let's get it moving. That's my feeling.
Okay, Councilor Koloff.
So I've always wanted the pool. That's easy. I have two problems, and I'm going to, work with everybody else. I'm going to cooperate. But, I do agree. I do agree that the school district needs to work through, because that isn't my call, okay? But I really do not like at all a group that is specifically invested in a sport who's going to end up with something they didn't want. So to the extent that we avoid that or keep it open for truly their input, which I think can be done, as long as we don't get heavy-handed. The second piece, though, is I feel the same way. The lady came in that said, why is one sport being pitted against another sport? And I don't know how to play golf. I don't have any interest in golf, but her point was well taken. And I'm still not hearing why it is, and I mean this sincerely, I don't understand why it is that Razik is not being considered. And the reason I say that, I get it about the ball fields, but when you look at the history, which was laid out in all of the various reports going back from 1990, you know that the siting of a pool was in that general area of Luscher and Razik. And now we say, oh, well, you got kicked out somehow. Razik was purchased in 1996. It's 9.8 acres. So at least look at that and see how that could be worked, because I don't know that you have a really good answer to the people that say, it may have been a puny muni, but it was our puny muni. And we can get in there at any time and play our 18 holes, and we're just happy as can be. And we've put before them a vision of how it's just awesome. We've got all these sports things and there's synergy and our kids. I love all of that, I really do. But it's on the backs of the people who use that golf course, and it could be recreated, because we're not talking about miles apart. It could be recreated in another place. And I also looked through the history of it and saw that at times there have been task force. We've asked Westland to step up. They all go, oh, that's cool. And it didn't come through, and I get that. But those are my two concerns.
Councilor O'Neill.
A couple things. Mayor, I'm not going to totally agree with you on the pool.
But you still respect it.
But I still respect you and love you. But we're getting, I look at it this way. The school district is paying the $15 million for the competitive pool. What we're paying $15 million for is a warm pool and all the dry facilities. Well, we talked about building dry facilities at close to $15 million on that site, if I'm not correct. Yeah. So that's where I kind of see that. The school district's also giving us funding per year to manage the competitive pool side. We already spend in our parks right now X amount of dollars to have our program. So I don't really see it as dire on the budget side as the mayor does see it that way. As far as why we've looked at the golf course, this golf course discussion's been going on for 20 or 30 years, almost since the thing was created, because it's an 18-hole facility on acreage that's too small for 18 holes, and it's really not a golf course. You use golf tools, and it's got some holes, but it's not really a golf course. It's not where golfers would say, hey, I can go and play a really strong round of golf. I think if we can come out with a competitive 9-hole golf course, we're going to get a broader range of golfers that are using the course. So I'm excited to see that. Why put this facility there? Well, we know that we're going to lose, and we might even lose more than 2 fields over at Lake Ridge Junior High. We might lose up to 3. We're already field short in the city. That's why we need Rashid, where we can add even more fields over there over many years. So I think as moving the chess pieces around the chess board, I think we're doing a better job by moving those pieces around by using the golf course and making it better. Because I don't think we're going to invest any money in it if people say it's going to stay at 18 as it is. That, to me, would be kind of a waste of money. Might invest it in the driving range. And then, I'm not sure, but I think I can do math pretty well. And a 50-meter, 8-lane pool is not the same size as a 25 stretch. It's got to be almost 2/3 bigger. So, plus the room's bigger air to condition, just a much more expensive facility to operate. And those people that are selling you on the 50-meter stretch are doing a more regional concept for swimming. And we're really trying to do is deliver a pool for our citizens. At least the school district's trying to deliver a pool for their students that live in our city. They're not trying to build a facility that's a regional facility. So there you go.
Okay. Comments? Where are we? All right, good. Thank you. Oh, yes.
I just want to recap. Really quickly with you. This is what I heard council's looking forward to prior to the 16th, or in that is the fleshing out of the MOU with the school district, cost estimate for the offsite costs that aren't included. I'll make sure that everybody has the Skinny 50 analysis memo that Ballard King did. A total site map, which shows the golf course and the rec center on that. An area context map that shows the other properties. Did I miss anything?
Traffic mitigation, is that?
No, I think,
Whatever.
That's the offsite.
Yeah, the offsite.
I think you've done well. Thank
Okay,
you.
excellent, thank you.
Great recap.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you.
presentation.
Do you need anything else from us?
Okay, next is on the agenda is a consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they want taken off the consent agenda?
Wait, I think we have 6.3.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. 6.3, Preventative Maintenance Program.
Move to award. Oh, can we? Oh, do we need the
Oh, we have to have a
presentation?
Hold that thought 1 minute.
About 3 minutes, right?
3 minutes.
My favorite, Slurry.
Yeah. Good evening.
Thank
My
you,
name is
everybody.
Thanks, Parks and
Thank
Rec.
you.
Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Stefan Broadus, Assistant City Engineer, here to present the 2020 Slurry Seal, which is our engineering work order 287 as a part of our pavement management program. And just to give you a little bit of background, in October of 2017, the City Council approved the pavement management program, and included as a part of that for the year 2020 is this slurry seal package that I'm presenting tonight, as well as the pavement rehabilitation and the Wembley Park Road CIP project. So the pavement rehabilitation, we are expecting to present to you for approval in April, and the Wembley Park Road project you all approved in February. This is a map of this year's paving with the slurry seal, that is this presentation, being shown in green, and the other components of this year's pavement program also shown up here as well. In red is the pavement rehab, and blue is Wembley Park Road CIP project. So included in the pavement management program is a robust public outreach program, which includes all of these items, web pages on the city's website, flyers mailed out to all the homes that are adjacent to the work that will be performed, door hangers that will be hung up in the days and weeks ahead of the paving on each of these segments, variable electronic message boards that will be posted in the right-of-way, and new this year will be a full-time on-site information specialist. So that's someone that will receive questions or concerns from citizens and will be available to meet them on-site, on location, within a matter of minutes of receiving that call. And then finally is this informational video that I'm going to show to you now.
Oh, this is nice. We have over 153 miles of city streets in Lake Oswego, and we regularly inspect and track the pavement condition. Every year, we must balance complete pavement repairs and preventative maintenance with our limited road funds. Performing preventative maintenance on our local roads is the most economical way to extend the life of our streets. Crack sealing and slurry sealing are two preventative maintenance measures you'll see on Lake Oswego roads this summer. These activities are disruptive to nearby residents, but only for a few days. There are three major steps to this work that occur over a few weeks due to equipment and crew needs. First, we patch potholes or areas of significant deterioration. This generally takes a day or two in localized areas. Second, crews will seal cracks. Crack sealing is an inexpensive method to prevent moisture from seeping into small cracks that are common in aging pavement. Keeping water out of these cracks is one of the best methods to slow pavement deterioration. The contractor may briefly close a lane while they move along the road crack sealing. Last, we apply a slurry seal over the entire road. A slurry seal is a mixture of asphalt, sand, and water that is spread across the entire street. The slurry seal has a different texture than new asphalt that you may be used to. Like crack sealing, the slurry seal prevents water from seeping in and causing damage. The slurry seal needs adequate time to dry, so your entire street will be closed for up to 10 hours. That means no driving, cycling, or walking on the roads during the day that we crack or slurry seal. Driving on the road can damage your car and the road. But not to worry, if your street is scheduled to be crack and slurry sealed, we will notify you in advance. You will receive a letter in the mail, and the city's pavement website will be updated weekly with our schedule. Our contractor will place a door hanger on your home 48 hours before the day of slurry sealing. The door hanger will give you specific information about the exact street closure date. If you have a major concern with access, please let us know. Keeping vehicles off the road during the slurry sealing is key to a successful repair. And safety is our top concern, so emergency vehicles will always be allowed to access any street during work. We thank you in advance for your patience. To learn more about our street maintenance program, visit lakeoswego.city/pavement.
That was great. Just great. Can we get that on the website? So, yeah, that was awesome.
I was going to recommend that you put it on YouTube with a fee for the 2 to 7-year-old boys who would find that fascinating.
My daughter would find that fascinating.
So our schedule for this summer's paving, the Slurry Seal presenting tonight will likely start in July and run through October. The rehab scope, which again, going back to the map, was shown in red, that's going to run from May through October as well. And then our larger Wembley Park Road project is already underway and will likely run through November to completion. So with that, I show the recommendation up here and can take any questions that you may have.
Questions, anybody?
Yeah.
Councilor Lamont?
Two things. One is on page, in the report, on page, let me get to the page number here. Oh, it's on the top. It's the funding chart. VSS International at $781,772. Now, we have budgeted, now the engineer's estimate was $840, and I know Director Rooney has talked about making sure we beef them up so we don't get shortchanged, but actually we're going to save money. But now I'm looking at the funding source. We have 571,000 and 500,000. So there's $1 million in that fund, okay? And I did the math at home, and there's $289,228 remaining if we give VSS this contract, right? So we had $1 million set aside minus the 781. Yes, no? No. Where's that money?
Okay, so a lot of that other money is going to be tied to the design of the project, as well as project staff and construction management.
All right, so that deficit, or the difference, 289,220 is for earlier design, engineering, administration. Okay.
Correct.
And then the second thing is just a reminder, because when we had it 2 years ago, the traffic flaggers weren't doing such a good job out of our neighborhood. And so they flagged us going out away from the lane that was being slurried, but they let everybody come back in on the bridge across the tracks right back into the slurry. So they had 2 flaggers, great for about 100 feet, and then they didn't keep it going to get us out to Iron Mountain, and people were driving right through the fresh slurry. So we just got to make sure they take the tail of the whole thing out where people will go, and that was the traffic flagging company that needed to do that. So just keep an eye on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I move to award the contract?
Yes.
Please do.
I do have one question.
Oh.
I'm just curious, between the bids number 1 and number 2, less than $1,000 out of a nearly $800,000 contract. Do we, is it just strictly based upon lowest price, nothing else?
There's, to answer your question, yes. The reason that can go to explain the very small spread here is there's really only 3 items in this whole bid. It's mobilization, so how much do you want to get paid to move your equipment out onto the site, crack sealing, and slurry seal. And so the unit prices for crack seal, for example, were, I think from one company, on the 3 companies here, one of them may have been 99 cents per foot. The other one was $1 per foot. The other one was $1.02 per foot. So it's very small unit prices with huge quantities. So the reason you have such a small spread here is it's very standard work. There's really 2 items of work plus a mobilization fee. So really small razor thin margin between the 2 companies. But yes, it was based on low bid, and we feel confident in that because there's such a standardized specification to follow. There's not really a whole lot to be gained by offering up unique approaches or innovations in this technology. Slurry seal kind of is what it is at this point.
Right. So with this particular company, have they, I don't know what was awarded before. Is it the same company that did their last work in the last round?
Is it the same one as last?
Same
Yes,
company. Yeah. Those are things where I feel like, that we, since it's probably obvious that maybe the second company was probably bid that last time too, and if they come so close, it's like, so close. And so I feel like, if they're both equally qualified, potentially looking at maybe what would it look like if we were to, have them come back with their best and final offer or something, just so we can diversify some of the people that can bid on these projects.
I think this particular type of contract, though, is required by state law to be lowest responsible bid, right? So I don't think we actually have a lot of discretion when we bid a contract like this. Is that right, David?
If it's bid as a low bid, then we don't have a lot of discretion. It could be done different ways, but, right.
So hear you, but I'm not sure that in this particular type of contracting that we can do innovative contracting.
I'm not asking for anything innovative here. I'm just thinking about maybe potentially having other equally qualified contractors have a shot at it as well, too. Is that something we potentially on the next time around, if we can talk offline about that, but that'd be something.
We can talk about how to do that.
There's been a motion made and was been seconded as well.
Well, I should make the whole motion? Or can I move to award a public improvement contract with BSS International Incorporation for the construction of the 2020 Preventative Maintenance Projects Work Order 287 Slurry Seal in the amount of $781,772?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.
And you need to reimpose yourself over in the next film, so just Photoshop, just Photoshop yourself in.
I'm telling you, those 2 to 7-year-olds would just go crazy.
Next is our consent agenda. Is there anything anybody wants removed from the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Next is a consent agenda for councilors only. The first is Resolution 2001, approving appointments to the Library Advisory Board.
Move to adopt resolution 20.01.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Next is Resolution 2008, asking for approval of appointment to the Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources Advisory Board.
Move to approve?
Second.
Any discussion?
The only thing I want to say is that we continually have exceptional candidates with lots of people applying, and it's wonderful that we have such a talent pool.
Yeah, it is. I agree. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Information from council.
Quick one.
Councilor Lamont.
April 12th from 9 to 12, we're going to have the senior celebration again. The first one was last year. The mayor kicked it off. We'll have a proclamation soon, and it's going to be the second annual senior celebration at Mary's Woods.
Aw,
Stay tuned, placeholder.
Anybody else?
I did.
Yes, Councilor Kolhoff.
Councilor Lamont raised something that I thought was pretty interesting. He was looking for demographic information. And this is along those lines. By the end of March, Metro will have out, available for all of us for free, what's called a regional barometer. And most of the meetings are giving previews of it. It's very exciting. They are looking at outcomes such as transportation, economy, ecosystems, climate, communities, and equity. What's interesting about it is that the data that's pulled and what they're looking for is for public policy. Whereas when we get on to databases on the internet, it's mostly to help businesses make money. So this is intended for our region to make good policy, and it actually is pretty exciting. I think you'll enjoy what you learn, but also help us, as we keep saying, give us some data to base our judgments on.
How do we get it again?
It'll be on their website, March 31st. And it also has, like I say, they start with what they have now. I think it's 300 sets, data sets. And then after a period of time and some use of it, they'll come back in and get plans in place to be able to keep it renewed and the data up to date.
Okay, Thank you. Anybody else? Anything from officers?
So I see the clock, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about two things. First, COVID-19. I think, first of all, I think I want to acknowledge how scary this disease is and how much our heart goes out to the folks we know who have been affected already by this disease. I want you to know a couple things about it, though. First of all, I want you to know that we are working very closely with Clackamas County and the Oregon Health Authority to make decisions about what can operate, what cannot operate. It was good for me to be able to go to the school district's press conference on Saturday, for example, and get to talk to Dr. Sarah Present about things like, should we keep the library open? Should we keep our events? And at this point, Clackamas County is telling us all that for most of us, it's very unlikely that we'll come in contact with the virus. And if we do, it's also very unlikely that we'll get the worst form of the disease, which is not to diminish the anxiety, but I would say anything you all can do to help point people to good information about the disease, and really the Oregon Health Authority's website and Clackamas County's websites really updated quite frequently. There's amazing how many rumors there are. It's mind-blowing, and with social media, not only do they spread like they used to in the old days, but they spread instantaneously. So anything you all can do in your community conversations to help us direct people to really good and accurate sources of information. I will also keep you updated as often as I can if the situation changes. The other thing I just want you to know is I'm really grateful to the city employees for how they've handled this. I think you come into the counter, I'm sure employees are just as anxious as anybody, but we have to keep this place running when you provide basic services. And one of the things we've implemented, for example, is we're going to tell people that if they show up with a cough or a fever, we're going to send them home. And it's really been terrific because the employees have been very responsive and receptive to that. Normally, if someone's wrestling with a small virus and they decide to come to work, we all kind of look at them sideways and say, well, I wish you'd go home, but we don't make them go home. And in this case, we are going to make folks go home. So I just want to assure you and the public that we're thinking very proactively about making sure that we're not infecting anybody. In the meantime, we're cleaning our buildings every night. We're not cleaning absolutely everything all the time, and as the county health officer will tell you, the surface that you touched is only as clean as the last person who touched it. So please wash your hands. Please don't touch your face. Personally,
Like I'm doing right
I
now.
find that to be the very hardest of all the assignments. Okay, that's the first thing I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention. So thank you all, and I'll keep you as informed as I possibly can.
And if I could just add quickly, I was at Costco Saturday morning after the news report Friday night.
You and everyone else in the
It was
region.
a zoo,
Yeah.
and the point I'd like to make is people need to calm down and not panic, because there were people taking all the water, and there was hundreds of other people needing water, taking all the sanitizers. When we had our water project, and we got the flyers that the water in our neighborhood was going to be off for a day, just for a day, and the flyer said, well, you might need a gallon or two to flush the toilet. I went to Albertsons for something else, and all the water was gone, and the manager standing there with his arms saying, the next shipment comes in, I'm going to ration it, because two knuckleheads bought the whole store out and not allowed some to be there for their neighbors. Spread it out a little bit. They don't need that much. So keep the panic down, be sensible, and follow our city and school district lead.
We're getting really great medical advice
Yeah.
from Oregon Health Authority and the county, and so as long as we follow that as people, we'll be okay. So I will say I learned Costco sold out of water, sanitizers, toilet paper, and frozen berries, and I'm still slightly baffled by the frozen berries.
Well, I have toilet paper for $10 a roll. So.
That's what my husband said. My husband said it's because the toilet paper is actually gold.
I would, if you wouldn't mind, like to add one thing that the school district pointed out, that because of the fear and the mild hysteria, there have been students who have felt the impact of the fear and hysteria. So I think we all need to be kind. If we hear of something going on, see something going on that's untoward, we're the adults.
Keep calm and carry on.
So I guess that leads me directly into my second topic, which is just to acknowledge the testimony you heard earlier from the folks from Respond to Racism about the police department. I think we all know that police departments in our country have struggled a long time with the legacy of racially biased policing practices, and in Lake Oswego, it's no different. We've had moments in our community's history where maybe we've had incidents where our police department hasn't behaved the way that we would all hope them to behave. And I acknowledge too that for a lot of folks, when they read stuff that happened, even if it happened a long time ago, which much of it did, it brings up other feelings and fears and anxiety that they have about what happens with police departments. Really, we know that police officers have the authority to take us into custody. They have a higher standard that they have to live to. I want to assure you, though, that the chief and I are working to make sure that our officers behave in a community that's consistent with your policies around helping Lake Oswego become a more welcoming and inclusive community. I outlined in my quotes to the newspaper about all the work that we're doing. It's not easy work. It's not fast work. It's not going to mean that we never make mistakes, but we are very much committed to building the public's trust every single call and by treating every single person in the community, whether they're a resident or a visitor, whether they're young, whether they're old, no matter their gender, no matter their race, fairly, and making sure they all have equal treatment. So I just want to say, I hear them, and many of the things that they've recommended actually are already being implemented in the police department. Some of the things that are not already being implemented are under consideration. There's some other things I think we have a little bit more of a struggle with, but at least we hear what they have to say, and we understand that it's going to take a lot of hard work to build trust with community members who really feel like past acts have betrayed their trust. But we're going to do it, so.
And we thank them for their hard work.
No, I think also be remiss to say also too that certainly you have to understand, well, on one hand, we as a city are doing things, and, Martha, thank you for your work working with the police chiefs. There are things that you're doing that the public doesn't see. Yeah. What they see is we as policy leaders, we as leaders, when we, to this day, are struggling to grapple with what do we even have a quote-unquote a DI issue here. So when we are discussing that and we have yet to come to terms with our own ability to recognize that we need something that is more lasting, that is something that it sends a different message. So on the one hand, staff and city managers work on that, but as policy leaders and also thought leaders in the community, I think we need to step it up a notch.
Okay, anything else?
No, thank you.
Then we're adjourned, and now we have one, we're gonna go on the LORA.
Yep.
We don't need to call a roll, do we? All right, first item is resolution approving debtors in the agency. Are you gonna talk to us, Mr. Cross, or is that necessary?
Can I move to adopt?
Yeah, you can.
I'd like to move to adopt resolutions 20.01 and 20.02.
Second.
Discussion or questions of Mr. Cross? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
We did it to you again.
Thank you for your sterling presentation, Mr. Cross.
That was awesome.
And next,
Actually, thank you for your email. It was very declarative.
Yes.
next is approval of meeting minutes from January 7, 2020.
Move to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, that's all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
No officers' reports? No, I just
No,
kidding.
none of that.
Board member report.
Talk to now.
Wait, no.